And welcome back, friends, once again for another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast. It's a beautiful day to be alive, and tonight's episode, we'll be looking at a sort of a dichotomy where we're going to introduce one side of this, sort of another dialectic, and then we'll be doing another episode consecutively that will sort of look at the opposite end of the spectrum. So, you might have seen our recent episode about black and white thinking, and we actually touched on this concept briefly in that one. So even in that episode, I said, well, we could do a whole episode on pretty much all of these in and of themselves. So here we are. This is one that we felt was worth like a deeper look because it's, there's definitely a lot to dig into here. So what is this concept we're talking about? This is tunnel vision, okay? Or you could say selective vision. You've heard of selective hearing. You only hear what you want to hear. This is like that, except with the way that you view the world itself, your viewpoint, your worldview. And so the first side of this polarity we're going to look at is it's all love and light. Everything's just one. I think everybody's seen a bit of this, at least, or maybe you yourself has, fallen victim to some of this type of thinking. Personally, I definitely fell into this at one point along my journey. I sort of went from being raised in a Christian home, and then I swung hardcore to the atheist. Life is meaningless. It's all just, the universe is just this empty machine. And then, I sort of swung back into the quote unquote new age mentality, which, don't get me wrong, we're not out to get the new age, or we're not saying it's all crap. There's actually a lot of very useful, valuable knowledge that comes with that system, or however you want to say that sort of ideology, so to speak. But there's some very distinct pitfalls embedded in this ideology that get thrown around all the time and are absolute spiritual cancer that need to be recognized and called out and eradicated if possible. So that's sort of my little introduction. If you'd like to add anything there, Brian.
Yeah, so essentially, what we're talking here is, very much kind of this new age belief that, everything is all love and light, and that, we shouldn't, look at the negative things. We're going to be looking at the law of attraction and some things like that. So, again, like Logan said, we're not totally just only ripping on this because, this was a step in both of our journeys as well. But, you could say that maybe, 60 to 70% of the information, just as like to throw a number out there, a good portion of it is actually valuable information. There's a lot of great information on yoga out there and breath work and, all these other healing modalities that we see kind of come through this movement. But there's also a good chunk of stuff that is, very poisoned. And it is put in there as a way of keeping people in that kind of last spiritual cul-de-sac. So we're going to kind of look at all these and then break them down. So obviously, I think a big one here that we can kind of, hit on and that you had wanted to bring up, Logan, was how the New Age movement in general kind of plays off getting people into a state of the imbalanced feminine. You see, especially, in the mindset of people that will identify as this, there's a lot of, say, like the talk about the, the patriarchy or, toxic masculinity or whatever it may be. So there's like it's just swinging people from, there's been this state of kind of masculine domination of society. So now they're feeling like they need to swing to the feminine, but they swing so far that they kind of leave out that balance of the masculine to help empower the feminine. And then they can get stuck in a state of polarity here, which is what we're talking about. Do you want to kind of riff on that a little bit, Logan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can kind of segregate, like the way that the two hemispheres of the brain have a tendency to lean towards certain ideologies, which is a natural tendency, but absolutely that dynamic is also being exploited by those who benefit from people being trapped in that half brain paradigm. And that's really what this is. And, it comes back to the way we're saying that we're not just trying to demonize the whole thing. It's that it's full of half truths that are missing that sort of masculine component to complete the equation, to create holistic vision and consciousness and awareness. So, and that's not anything to do with men and women. Plenty of men get caught up in this new age thing, and plenty of women get caught in the left brain materialism view as well. So don't get caught up too much on those words. Think more about the universal energies at play. It has nothing to do with our genders or our sex, biological sex or anything like that. It's the yin and yang, essentially. So much like in the black and white episode, we talked about the forest and the trees, where one is all about the individual trees, and the other is about the forest. And you're seeing a holistic view of all of the individuals that form a collective. And that's kind of what we see here with the whole, everything is all one, it's all just like part of the same thing, and tends to throw out discernment largely, or under the guise of judgment. So we're going to touch on all that, but we'll to get into the next sort of introductory aspect here is consciousness itself is awareness, and awareness is consciousness. So ultimately, the title of this talk is the tunnel vision, and we're talking about how your selective vision, you're only focusing on one thing, on one polarity, and this being the love and light thing, that kind of comes with this new age idea of don't focus on the negative, ignore it, because the teaching, so to speak, is that you're feeding the negative energy by talking about it, by looking at it, by drawing any kind of awareness to it. Now, I understand, don't sit around in victim mentality and bitching about your problems all the time and not taking action to actually create change in your own life. But to say don't look at the negative, literally just focus on what you do. This is that Abraham Hicks type of bullshit. Just focus on what you do want, and don't focus on don't fight what you don't want. I mean, that's creating a totally passive, disempowered person, straight up. And again, if the spiritual experience here, objectively as a human being, is to expand your consciousness, well, what is consciousness but awareness? How can you ever become more conscious, more evolved spiritually if you're not looking at the world from a holistic perspective, and seeing everything, not just what you do want, and ignore what you don't want to be true, and it's just going to go away. In fact, people with bad intentions rely on ignorance and apathy to control. So the exact opposite of that teaching is true. By ignoring it, you are feeding what you don't want. So, yeah, Brian, if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. And
you got some good juicy goodness on that there.
Yeah. So what this brings up for me is really how different that mindset is than from the animist or the pagan mindset, as we've spoken about before, that you don't find in like paganism, animism, where there's only like just this light worship. You find that there's ancestral worship, there's looking at death, looking at kind of the darker side of things a lot of times is just as much of a spiritual experience and just as necessary as looking at the other, because you need to be able to understand and experience your full expression of consciousness, and you, through free will, you have the ability to make choices that could be good or bad. So understanding, delving into those parts of yourself that could be deemed negative or whatever is actually a great path and way of discovering, and then looking and seeing it like where you have programming in there that's actually getting you out of alignment with cosmic law. And again, understanding and getting out of this black and white thinking that the light is the good and the black is the bad or the dark is the bad, and just because it's dark or whatever that it's evil. That's a very like monotheist Christian, in the New Age obviously pulls a whole lot of their influence
Yeah.
from the Abrahamic traditions. Very kind of monotheistic viewpoint, with that, looking at like everything that's dark as bad. Again, I've talked about a lot about Mother Hela as one of my favorite goddesses to work with, and she will appear to you, as a beautiful woman or a corpse or a mixture of both, depending on what you have. She reflects that, inside you, she reflects that back to you because she's that sacred space that allows you that self-reflection so you can then evolve and learn the lessons that you need to. So that's, the farthest thing that you would be from being negative. Like that's a very positive thing to be able to have a sacred space like that where you can reflect and look at even the darkest aspects of things. So that's kind of, what that brought up for me is like how, kind of very different those mindsets are. Let me see here. The other thing I wanted to hit on, kind of here is, we can go into, looking at the whole law of attraction idea, and this is a teaching that's obviously very big in the New Age movement. People have heard of The Secret or whatever, this law of attraction that, you can just, think about what you want to manifest, and as long as you're feeling good and everything will come to you. That's very, very different than the law of manifestation, which is more about what you're taking action to manifest. You can think with the law of attraction and sit on the end of your bed all day and think about all the different things that you want to achieve. But unless you actually get off your ass and take action on it, those fucking things aren't going to happen. So if you want to manifest something, with the law of manifestation, it requires that action. And I would also like to point out the difference between those two is that the law of manifestation does not require you to feel good all the time. This is one of the things that the New Age teaches, that, you have to feel good all the time in order to, bring in or attract what you want. But the law of manifestation, you could feel totally afraid of taking an action. You could feel really shitty, really depressed. As long as you are taking action fearlessly towards your goal, that's what the universe is going to reflect back to you, because you're putting that cause out, and the effect you get back is from the actions that you're taking.
Right.
But, so it doesn't matter how you feel, it's the actions that you're taking.
Well, it does matter to some degree how you feel. It's an interplay between these two dynamics. The action being the masculine that we mentioned is the kind of the missing component from that teaching. Your emotions is the feminine, how you're feeling, and both of those things definitely play into it, but you can't say it's just one or the other, which is exactly
Right.
what the law of attraction teaches. Is it's just all about your thoughts and emotions, and that's the most important thing. You can't put too much stress on either one, because most of the great things, like when people work hard for the shit in their life, they don't always feel like doing that. They're like, oh, I don't want to do this, like it feels like work, because it is work. That's
Right.
that masculine, where you have to man up and be tough and push through it and do it anyways, because it's what's required. It's not about always how you feel necessarily. And the other imbalanced implication of this, it's only how you think and feel, is that as long as you're always thinking positive thoughts and feeling happy feelings, nothing bad will ever happen to you. So you're saying that essentially bad things never happen to good people as long as they're believing and thinking is correct, and that is absolute nonsense.
Right. And what I wanted to say there is, what I was saying is, I wasn't saying to that the feelings don't matter so much, but as it's not that you are not acknowledging your feelings, you're acknowledging them, but you're recognizing that you don't have to be in that perfect state of happiness in order to still take action, would be what more specifically I was trying to get at here. But that, I think it's also an excellent point that, it kind of comes with that assumption that if, you're going off the mindset, that your state of mind and how you feel is attracting everything into your life. And that very much has that kind of assumption in there that, bad things don't, bad things don't happen to good people, or if if your feelings are all in the right place, that nothing bad would ever happen to you. And again, like as you said, that's definitely something that's not true at all, because there's we not only do we as individuals have free will with ourselves, but obviously every other human being on the planet. So someone else could still very much choose to violate your rights, to harm you, to initiate violence towards you. That doesn't necessarily mean that you attracted that based off of how you were feeling. So I think that's an excellent point to look at for sure.
Absolutely. And even that you can look at, yeah, sure, if you're walking around and you've got worry all over your face because you're afraid of something bad happen, there's a good chance you could very well actually attract something negative to happen, because you are emitting that frequency. And guess what? Other predators feed on fear. So they're actually going to recognize that, see it as an exploitable weakness, and choose you as a target. So that would be, a perfectly valid example where that dynamic would actually play out. But then on the other side of the token, somebody can be walking around totally calm and collected and thinking positive thoughts, and guess what? They were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, because someone else with their own free will had the intention to do harm to somebody, and that's their choice to make. That's not their right to do, but it is their ability to do. And that's the difference when you're discussing, morality, is you have to understand the difference between ability and rights.
Right. That's what that brings up for me, is looking at the Kanaj rune. That's why I love that rune so much.
Oh,
is
yeah.
You look at knowledge, that not only is intellectual knowledge, but that you have the ability to do that, and that you have the right to do so.
Right.
So definitely looking at the Kanaj rune could be something interesting there as well.
It's a canage a trois of rights.
Yeah. Another kind of new age belief that we see out here a lot is that, this whole all belief should be respected, or, you shouldn't judge, this kind of thing, which again is that cutting off from that masculine, that ability to have discern, because as we talked about before, the intellect means to pick apart from among. So, the right brain is dealing with the oneness of everything, the connection. The left brain deals with being able to, split that apart into individuations to analyze that data. And you need both of those. That's what true intelligence is being able to recognize a pattern and then, predict creatively how that's going to tie together. So, that's those two energies coming together. But when we're cutting off the discernment and saying that, we shouldn't judge, you're really setting yourself up for kind of spiritual vampirism, because you're just allowing whatever kind of belief system or bullshit that's around you to influence you. And when we can look at, this idea, when you really break it down, it just doesn't make sense that all beliefs should be respected. That's something that just isn't true at all. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't go and have their own beliefs of things, and that you should make everybody think just like you. That's not what we're referring to. But what we're referring to is when, say someone has a belief system that they believe it's totally okay to harm other people. For whatever example, we could have someone that believes, murder is perfectly fine. You don't need to respect that belief system. If there's a belief system that leaves people disempowered, that's a mind virus that fundamentally, takes away their power as a human being and makes them feel less than what they should. That's not a belief system that should be or deserves to be respected at all. And that's not to say that if someone has that, you're just totally, going around trying to force them and change their mind. But you also don't have to just accept it. You can very much say that, put your opinion out there. If if it's something that's really big, obviously you could create a channel and do an episode about something like that. But yeah, this idea that no matter what people's belief systems are, those should be accepted and tolerated. Because obviously there are many, many examples where we could look at that, where people would fall into an extreme belief system that would actually be a violation of sovereignty and cosmic law. So if that belief system is by default a violation of sovereignty and cosmic law, violating people's boundaries, shouldn't be fucking respected.
Right. It comes back to truth. Truth has to be held as the highest principle. So judgment if you and your knowledge and your consciousness is aligned to truth, then your judgment is good, because you're judging truth from not truth correctly, and you have the eyes to know the difference. The trouble is, most people are so brainwashed and indoctrinated with absolute bullshit and out of alignment with the nature, the laws of nature, and themselves and their own authenticity, that their judgment reflects those illusions via the law of mentalism instead of the truth itself, because truth is not valued the way that it should be. If everyone valued truth as the highest thing, we would all be trying to align more and also rejecting belief systems that are not in alignment with truth, especially when they cause harm or promote causing harm, like statism, for example, genocide, things like that. I don't know.
Slavery, all that different stuff that obviously
Right.
were belief systems that people had, but those things, when you look at it honestly, those are not things that should be respected. So
Right, and let's not forget, those things happen not because people are just all evil, but because they think that they can do good by way of those actions. That you can create freedom through slavery, That's why we have the government, a slave system, because they think we need that in order to have freedom. That's the absolute mess that we're in here.
Right. And another big one that we see here in the New Age movement is the whole, and this ties in with the love and light thing, is that never get angry. And as I've talked about before, emotions are energy in motion. So whenever you try to stay in one state of being, like you're trying to stay all happy, or you're staying in a state of total anger, or depression, or whatever it may be, you're staying in a place of stagnation. So for emotions to be energy in motion, they need to flow. When they become stagnant, it's like that murky pool that we've talked about before that gets diseased and filled up with all sorts of gunk. And a person that is denying that they ever feel angry, and they're just saying, they're all happy all the time, I can pretty much guarantee that those people have deep-seated unconscious rage in them. And that's why when you bring up something that contradicts what they're believing, you a lot of times will get a very extreme emotional reaction from them. And that's because it's coming from a place of unconscious trauma and emotion, because they're suppressing it. Like, if, as a human being, you have to acknowledge that you are going to feel the full range of emotions. And to be a healthy human being, you need to be able to move and flow through those, without really trouble. Like, if you can experience all the different emotions at once, even, to an extent, you can have multiple emotions about one subject. But when you're staying in that place of stagnation, you're just cutting yourself off from that full experience. And if you're saying, I refuse to look at any of these emotions, I refuse to feel this, well, when that does come up, like it will, because you're a human being, if you're refusing to acknowledge it and feel it, what happens? You shove it down, and then it gets into the subconscious mind. And then you shove it down further, and it gets into the unconscious mind. And what happens? It opens up that ghost door that we talked about before in Helheim, in the realm of Southwest, and it opens them up for that dogmatic feedback loop, that unconscious feedback loop that we've done a couple episodes on. And this is definitely a subject that could very much apply to and tie in with.
Right. Because it's, emotion is energy in motion.
Right.
So when they say you're bottling up your emotions, what does that mean? Imagine you have a bottle of Coke and baking soda, and you're just shaking it up inside, but that lid is still on there tight. You're bottling up that emotion that's building that charge, that emotion trying to move. And and that's why, like you said, that's the reason that these liberal, new agey type of people are so easily triggered, because they're constantly suppressing their emotions, and that way on every little thing just kind of sits them over the edge.
Right, exactly. You have to be able to acknowledge that, again, there's not, I wouldn't even say that there's such a thing as negative emotions. Like, it's totally okay to get angry, especially when there is a righteous cause for that anger. It's okay to be sad when something sad happens. None of those emotions are negative. They're just emotions. They're just as much a part of the human experience as happiness and joy and all of those other ones are. They're just kind of on the other side of it,
Well, yeah, and think about if taking it back to that concept of the more aligned your consciousness is to truth, the more your emotions will reflect that alignment. So good things, as in objectively good, what's good for you, what's good in harmony for everyone, will make you happy, as opposed to a very sick person who literally gets joy from causing suffering to others. Like, think about that, the
Right.
misalignment of your emotions. And
Oh yeah.
a narcissistic control freak gets angry because they can't control you and you did something they didn't like, because you're not giving them what they want, as opposed to a person who is a true spiritual warrior. What pisses you off is injustice. When something is
Right.
out of alignment with truth, that anger calls you to take action and fix it. And that's
Right.
why anger is demonized in the new age, because they don't want, it's all against action, just like the law of attraction. Just sit there and meditate and accept everything. Just accept it. Yes, just be one with everything and don't try to fix or look at the problem or any of that kind of thing. Total disempowered slave mentality right there, if you're taking it to that extreme. Again, yes, be in acceptance of the things you can't change. You're stuck in traffic. No reason to sit there and lose your mind about it, but don't just sit there and accept the rampant injustice that is happening right this very second, just because getting angry is negative and low vibration, and I'm evolved beyond that.
Yeah, yeah, that's total now. And again, anger is a very useful emotion, especially when used properly. It can be an extremely motivating force. Obviously on this channel, people have seen us bring a little bit of, that Jupiter retrograde energy, especially in like our episode, where we talk about the thin blue line, talking about police. I definitely got a little fired up in that, but that's useful to get that charge across. It's just a different kind of charge. And when you can look at things from the magical perspective, any charge is a charge. It's that
Right.
You didn't have the choice to how to utilize it and what you want to do with that charge. And it's becoming aware, conscious of it, and not ignorant of it, that allows you to step in that place of empowerment to take the action that you need to.
Right. Yeah, I mean, think about, like, to take it back to kind of a nostalgic feeling. Say that, and this is obviously not going to apply to people who have had abusive parents or something like that, but just think, like, if you had a father when you're little and you don't really have the ability to protect yourself, and your father gets angry about something, but for your protection, essentially, that's going to make you feel good, because that's actually the divine masculine, that it's that kind of, "Whoa, I'm glad he's on my side" kind of thing, because that energy is being wielded for good, for truth, for the goodness of the family and everything. So
Right.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was like when my son was born and the nurse kind of came in and just like made this huge assumption that like they were going to circumcise him, and I said, I very firmly said, fuck no, you aren't. I got extremely firm, and I brought that masculine energy, and not in a rageful way, but I brought that firm, grounding, stern power that they knew I wasn't fucking around, and if you mutilate my child, we're going to have problems. And that's
Right.
something, that's a perfect example of that. And I think here, a lot of this kind of general theme, and people may have heard me talk about this before, is my idea of complicated simplicity. So this was like a spiritual law or truth that I discovered, totally on my own, but radically changed my life. And it's looking at the complicated simplicity in things. So understanding that things can be extremely complicated and simple at the same time, because it's embodying the whole of the universe. Like, for example, we are
Practice.
all part of the mind of all. We're one, but we're also individuations of consciousness. We're fractals and very complicated, because we all have our own individuation of consciousness. There's so many different variations of that. It's extremely complicated. So someone could be a human being, but how they're playing out being a human being. And I challenge people to apply this, concept to any area of their life, and you're going to be able to find it to resonate, to be true. But when you're only looking at the simplicity, the oneness of things, you're failing to look at the complexity, the individuations of all the variables, all the parts that you need to look at. And again, to have that holistic intelligence, you need to be able to have both of those. Otherwise, you're only working with half. And again, with the sacred masculine and feminine energies, when they're without each other, they're imbalanced and they're actually disempowered. So when they come
Exactly.
together, that's when they step into their truest form of being, because they have the support of the other one.
And that means happening within yourself first. You have
Right.
to master these energies within yourself before you start looking to anyone else. And that's kind of the key here, is the government and the other control systems are always there. It's a narcissistic psychopathic system. And how do they operate? What does any narcissist want? They want you to need something from them so that you're dependent and codependent on them.
Right.
So yeah, people understand, well, we need some kind of masculine because the world is a big scary place, but I'm so weak and disempowered. We need the government to be my daddy and protect us, and we need to be disarmed because, so it's that disempowered and, never resist yourself. Just call the police, that sort of thing. It's totally disempowered.
Right, absolutely. And the next little thing that I wanted to look at here was this idea that you can never really know anything, which is also known as solipsism. Something that not not over the whole throughout New Age community, but it is something that you see kind of thrown around there a lot within those circles. That this idea that you can never really know everything, and that everybody just has their own truth, and that's not a total truth. We need to apply critical thinking. This is what this episode's all about, is tapping into that, tapping into the masculine energy and apply critical thinking. And one of the skills with that is learning to understand when things are true and false, when things are sometimes true and sometimes false, and when things are half truths. And, when we start looking at these things, because it gets you to where you can start seeing the nuance in things, and you get out of that black and white dialectic thinking that we talked about in a previous episode, because things are not always just a black and white, true or not true. They can be, but they can also be half truths. They can be, for example, I could be holding my hand closed, and it's true right now that, I'm holding it closed, but that doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. So it's sometimes true, right, sometimes false,
Right. But the fact that you just had your hand closed, now that's been woven into the web of weird and cannot be undone. Right. This came to me the other day. When you commit a crime, think about, you're committing. When you do something, you take an action, you are now committed to the consequences of that action.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good, dude. That's good. No, very much.
And,
go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, this whole idea, this is one of the worst forms of brain cancer that I can possibly think of, is thinking that you can't have knowledge, because knowledge is power. It really is.
Right.
And it's like all these fallacious, it's that black and white thinking, people are fallible. So people make mistakes sometimes, therefore nothing is knowable. It's like, that doesn't mean, here's the way I distinguish it. An idea that is true is knowledge. An idea that is not true is a belief.
Right.
Because if it's true, you don't need to believe it, because it is true already. Your belief doesn't make it so. Mm-hmm. And if it's not true, it's an idea you hold, you believe in, but is not true. In fact, you are believing in a lie, in an illusion. So
right.
If you have an idea that is true, that's knowledge. You have knowledge. Mm-hmm. I see the sky as blue. That is true.
Right. Well, and the thing about knowledge here is that, and the objective truth is, you can apply the scientific method, and what's one of the aspects of that, if you're looking at it, but then you're making sure those results are verifiable. They can be
verifiable.
So
let's take that example.
You can go and test over and over again. And if you can keep coming up with the same results, well, you recognize that pattern, you apply holistic intelligence, and then you can start creatively, interacting with that pattern. That's where you're coming into a state of awareness of consciousness. But that's something that's absolutely possible, for sure.
Right. Verifiable is the key, absolutely. Because right. I know for a fact, when I just said, I see the sky as blue, I know some little wise guy out there, said, well, what about colorblind people or whatever, this and that. Yeah, except that we have instrumentation that can actually measure the wavelengths of light and prove that this is what I'm seeing is the frequency that people call blue. Right. Yeah, blue is just a made-up word for a color, but the frequency is measurable and repeatable. You know
Right.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. The word is describing something that is actually there and existing in nature. It's just the medium for the communication. Definitely
Right.
very, very good point to look at. Um, and the next thing we wanted to dive into here was this this idea that resistance is lower vibrational. Or, and we talked about this a little earlier with the emotions, like, anger is lower vibration, or I'm, only good vibes here. That's
Right.
that's kind of,
Or
interesting.
if you fight back, you're no better than they are. Like you're just joining in their hate. That's just hateful.
Right, yeah, and that's like, saying that, like, if, for example, if someone was to break in your home and try to cause, violence against you, they're the one. That's why it has the same root. They're the one initiating the violation of rights. That
Violence,
person's
yes.
using violence. But if you use force to repel them, you're not using violence. You're using force to stop violence. So making
To
that
eliminate the
right,
threat, the chaos. You're
right,
restoring peace. And
right,
one little side note is that your being forceful is not an act of hate because you're defending yourself, which is an act of self-love, or
right.
your
Your
family.
boundaries. Right,
Yep, right.
exactly.
You are protecting that which is good because you care about goodness. That is an act of love, not hate.
Right. Well, and keeping, obviously, protecting yourself, like protecting your sovereignty, your boundaries, you obviously have the right to do that. So that action, using that force to repel violence, is absolutely in alignment with cosmic law. You're not the one initiating the violation of rights. So,
Right.
yeah, that idea that, resisting of any kind is kind of a lower vibrational. That's definitely something that, I mean, if there were people out there that wanted to control the masses, what a better lie to sell them than resistance is just lower vibration, you know, because what are they going to do? They're not going to want to resist. So,
Right.
I mean, very, very
Again,
convenient for social
and
engineers to have people buy that bullshit.
yes. And a perfect example of verifiable, I can speak from personal experience. I was bullied a lot in school, and though it's terrible that kids treat each other this way, guess what? I still have to accept the responsibility of my part in that I made myself a target by being a total pushover pansy and never standing up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
sends
Yeah.
the message, hey, do what you want, I'll just take it, I'll just be your little bitch.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's definitely something that is an excellent point to look at. Is that, the people have their free will decision that yes, they can violate your right, but you still have the free will choice that you can either take that and be a victim, or you can stand up and defend yourself.
Right.
Um,
And that
and
kind
this,
of relates to the whole turn the
yeah,
other cheek thing.
yeah,
you
that's
know
what I was
that
actually
that
going to hit on.
yeah is
Totally.
that and this obviously is a Christian teaching or something that came from like Jesus's Sermon on the Mount, and obviously it gets interpreted a lot of different kind of ways, but I mean, you know whether you look at the fundamental whatever you think Jesus really meant, there's still the mainstream perception that very much is that same pacifistic, like just turn the other cheek kind of, like don't fight back, don't stand up for yourself sort of thing.
Right, which very interesting that comes out of in this little bit of off topic, but out of a religion that's very much about you know uh, giving up your power to something outside of yourself. So
Right.
obviously, you don't need to resist. You don't need to have your boundaries and your sovereignty, because that would make you egotistical or whatever that may be. Um, so that definitely an interesting thing to look at. Another one that we can kind of see here in this movement is this idea that chaos should be feared, or the fear of chaos. Well, we can look at it from the magical perspective. Chaos can actually be something that's extremely useful. Now, understand me here that I'm not advocating that you just go out and try to create chaos. I'm not a chaos sorcerer. That's not at all what I practice. But recognizing that chaos is something that is part of the universe,
It's
it does
unavoidable.
happen. Right,
It's
something
gonna happen.
there. So it does have a charge. So just like any charge, that charge can be utilized. And a lot of times with chaos, that charge is extremely intense. So if you can start learning how to tap into that, and navigate it and utilize it can be an extremely useful force. But the idea that
Right.
you totally fear it and avoid it is it's kind of wanting to stay in this utopian state of being where you're everything's love and light, everything's perfect, nothing's going to go wrong, there's not going to be any suffering, and all
Mm.
this, and that is very disconnected from reality, and you're cutting yourself off from some of your most valuable lessons, because this life contains all sorts of different experiences, and some of those experiences can be struggles that you can suffer. It can hurt really bad, but some of those experiences just like that will be some of the ones that will teach you your most valuable lessons
Mm.
that you will really appreciate. Like you do need to learn through that kind of apophatic process sometimes, where you fuck up and then you learn. You have to suffer a little bit and then you learn how to avoid that.
Right.
But to try to cut yourself off from it, you're cutting yourself off from the lesson that you signed up for when you chose to came here.
Right. But if you even want to look at it from like, well, again, chaos itself is unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
Life includes suffering.
Right.
It's not all about suffering, but it includes suffering. It's an inherent part of the universe, and that should be welcomed, because strength comes from adversity. This is a natural law. If you're saying you're all about natural law, you have to understand that this is, a big part of what makes something strong and formidable, is going through that gauntlet of trial and struggle to come out the other side, transmuted into
Mm-hmm.
gold. That's the alchemical. Because look, even if it's something that was totally out of your hands, had nothing to do with your karma, bad shit, and like we said before, bad shit still happens to good people. That's
Mm-hmm.
just a part of life. And you have two options. You can either utilize that and find out how you can somehow leverage that to your advantage, or what's the only other option? To be a
Mm-hmm.
helpless victim and just say,
Right.
oh, how could this happen to me? And just complain and stay stuck in that stagnation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have two options. Why not take your power, accept, well, what can I do? I couldn't change or avoid this situation. It happened. What can I do now? What
Right.
do I have the power to actually do? It's
Right,
very
exactly,
important.
because you can choose how to react to it and what actions you take towards that. Um, Another one here, that we can kind of we hit on here, and this can tie in with the chaos, is looking at kind of the alchemical process, and it's a process that includes some chaos, because there is a time of destruction, and then things have to be reborn into something new. And we could also look at it through the runes as well, because again, these are universal laws, so we can find them through many different
Right.
traditions, and we can see the
The
runes like,
Hagalage.
yeah, like Hagalaj, or also Uwaj. It's about
Yep.
death and rebirth. So it's this time of,
Urkanage.
yeah, right.
Urkano.
It's a transformative process, but that includes some chaos, because things have to first be destroyed before they can be rebuilt. So it's something that should be embraced in that sense and not feared.
Mm, absolutely. So let's see here. We can look at, and this does sort of relate to the thing before about the whole, never confront anyone, or just, all beliefs should be respected and everything like that. Is that, we shouldn't speak up for on behalf of truth. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this might seem counterintuitive, because we've spoken on, giving unsolicited advice and things like that. And I think it's important to really try to find a balance in there. And this in itself, balance is all about navigating those gray areas where,
Mm-hmm.
over here too far is bad, over here is too far is bad, but somewhere in the middle is okay. And everybody's going to kind of navigate that differently. But ultimately, and especially, I'll say this much. Now, calling somebody who's a total stranger, I guess I should also caveat this, as um, as long as somebody isn't actually causing harm. When somebody's causing harm, you have the right to actually step in and, depending on the severity of the situation, intervene there. But if it's just somebody, doing something that is only reflecting on them, like say they eat a poor healthy diet, for example, you know, just approaching a stranger and telling them like you're going to kill yourself or whatever, you know, that's a bit out of line. You're not really respecting that person and their sovereignty, essentially. But if it's somebody you care about, say your friend, you know I appreciate when my friends kind of give me a reality check sometimes and kind of kick me in the ass and be like, look, you're fucking up, you know, and I know my friends feel the same way, and I've had to do that before, and they may get a little testy in the moment, but they, you know, most of the time end up like thanking me for that and showing appreciation for that. So I mean, you know, Brian, do you want to? You're still muted.
Sorry, I heard my little guy kind of crying in the background, so I muted it.
Yeah.
But really getting, you know, looking at what unsolicited advice is helpful. So this is just kind of where you're going around and you're in a state of constantly and only doing this. So you're going into a black and white state of thinking. You're not finding the balance, and you're just staying in one state all the time in a state of stagnation. When you're constantly going around just trying to tear down other people's work or tell them how wrong they are, or they're a dumb sheep because they don't understand, or whatever that may be, when you're coming at it from a very dogmatic perspective, that's unsolicited advice. You know, just like, you know, I talked about in that black and white episode, I had, you know, a Christian kind of show up at my home, you know, onto my property and knock on my door and, you know, trying to do that. And I explained to him, you know, in a firm way, what you're doing is unsolicited. I didn't ask for it. Like, I don't go around knocking on people's doors asking them if they've heard about, you know, Odin and Thor and Freya. I understand boundaries. That's not my fucking business what they believe, you know. So I'm just not going to go do that. But at the same time, on the flip side of it, there is a time where giving advice is very helpful. For example, like, if, as you mentioned, having a friend. Well, with a friend, there is that, you know, kind of relationship there that you understand that, you know, sometimes, you know, that's a dynamic that might play out, that sometimes they might notice a behavior in yourself you didn't notice. And as a friend, they're bringing that up to you, but not to tear you down, but as a way of helping you look back and reflect on that behavior. So that would fall into more of kind of, there was like that, even though it may not have been directly solicited in that instance, there was kind of that relationship that was already established that was there. Or, you know, if you had, like, where we have a YouTube channel, we'll ask people to like and comment and share or whatever. So if they comment on there, guess what? It wasn't unsolicited because we asked for those comments. We asked them to share their opinion. It's
Right.
You know, it's solicited at that point. Now, people, like, if we just had someone coming on that was just constantly trying to troll or do whatever, and they weren't trying to add anything of value or of a benefit, that would be a lot more of like kind of an unsolicited type of situation.
Well, and you can look at it like this channel is our virtual property.
Right.
We're inviting people to come in and listen to us and, you know, share our living room here. But if people can't behave themselves and they're disrupting our ability to do our thing, or other people to get their, you know, to their experience, we have the ability to eject them or ban them or block, you know, delete their comments or whatever have you, because this is our space. We have our authority because it's our property.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, again, this goes back to the whole, you know, and for understanding what's solicited and unsolicited, you have to understand boundaries. So, you know, looking at the Thurisage room is obviously a great place to start. And I'd like to also address, you know, coming at it from the perspective of a spiritual warrior, and not from a place of like this monotheistic savior projection that we've talked about, that you feel like you have this knowledge and everybody else is dumb sheep, so you're just obligated to go out there and give all your energy and save them all because they can't do it themselves. What a fucking narcissistic and disempowered mindset that is, telling, you know, other people that, you know, or thinking that they need you to spiritually save them. Whereas if we look at it from the perspective of a spiritual warrior, and recognizing that every single person is sovereign and that they have that ability to come to that realization on their own, even if they're not doing it through the same path as you, even if they're not at the same level of awareness at the same time as you are, that doesn't fucking matter. Like, if they're willing to actively seek after and go after what they want to learn fearlessly, you know, you don't have any right to try to stop them from that. You know, and to do so, that's a boundaries violation, you know. So I think that's very much, an interesting
Well,
thing to look at, as the kind of the difference between the mindset of the spiritual warrior that we see in, like, paganism and animistic philosophies versus where we look
mm,
at it in, the monotheistic kind of these Abrahamic traditions that very much have this kind of savior projection and thing going on all the
yeah.
time.
And you can look at it like this too, is that, yes, you might care about them and want to help them and save them, but guess what? Everything is correspondence, right? It has to start from within, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if truth is the ultimate virtue, objectively, regardless of if you value it as such, um, truth must be cared about. So that care has to be intrinsic. You forcing it down their throat is not going to make them love that truth. In fact, it's going to
Right.
make them hate it and hate you for it. And you also have to understand the progress of the learning experience through journey. If somebody's still trying to learn to write their ABCs, you coming in there and trying to force them to learn Shakespeare, how to recite Shakespeare, it doesn't make sense because you're not respecting where they are on their journey. You have to,
Right.
if you really view yourself as a teacher, you have to speak to them where they're at in a way that they can actually understand. Otherwise, it's not about your altruistic desire to help them and empower them. It's about you proving something and being the right one and being the enlightened one and just, shoving it in their face.
Right. Yeah. Because, yeah, definitely that. And there's a great book
Ego,
that, kind of hits
egotism.
on this whole mindset here that we're hitting, the mindset of the spiritual warrior. And we'll bring this on an episode at some point, but there's a great book that we'd like to recommend called Odin Says Jesus Was a Coward. Don't get caught up and triggered by the name. Take the time to read the book before you just dismiss it. And it very much in depth explains this mindset and why giving unsolicited advice like that is very much the exact opposite of what a spiritual warrior should be
You'll
doing.
see that.
There we go.
There
Yeah,
we go.
excellent book. It's by a wonderful guy
Michael
named
William
Michael
Denny.
William Denny, also known as the Thunder Wizard. And if anyone isn't familiar with his work, his YouTube channel, thunderwizard.com, or any of his many books he has out there, can't recommend that man's work enough. Very, very excellent content, high quality content that everybody should for sure check out if this is something that interests them.
Right. So the next thing I definitely wanted to touch on here, as I've experienced this personally with sort of romantic experiences that I've had with people that were very much caught up in this new age mentality, which, admittedly at the time I was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was still kind of in that, but I was also starting to transition more towards natural law, anarchy, things like that. This idea of there's no mistakes, or there's no such thing as failure. It's all just lessons. And this is another one of those things that's a half truth, right? Of course, you should be gleaning the knowledge, the lesson in every experience, whether it's a positive or a negative experience. But to say that mistakes don't exist is lying to yourself. Mm-hmm. So we want to look at the actual definitions of these words and really, look at that. So failure means omission of occurrence or performance, failing to perform a duty or expected action. So you had a certain outcome that you were trying to render, you took action on it, and your actions did not bring about that outcome that you said you wanted or set the intention for. Everybody makes mistakes and failures. So where they're coming from is they're trying to get people away from, saying I'm a failure or, like beating themselves up over it. But to say that there's no such thing as mistakes, I think is swinging to the other extreme, to where you're not going to take any personal accountability for yourself. I didn't make that mistake. It was just a lesson, just a learning experience. It's like you have to own your actions and call things what they really are. And that's another one of those things that tends to come with that right-brained, sort of overly feminine mentality that, you see a lot in like political leftism, of just like getting away from labels, not wanting to label things. And that's, again, it's anti-discernment. How the hell else are you going to know what's an apple in a pile of shit? You got to be able to tell the difference, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it definitely, using discernment is really the whole, what we're getting at here, and being able to tap into that masculine energy. Um, Another, kind of idea that, this is kind of a funny one that ties in here also, is this idea of the saviors coming to get us, like either aliens, or, the Pleiadians, or the star seeds, or the indigo children, or whatever it may be, that they're just coming here to save us. And it kind of,
Mm.
I think there's a lot we can get out of this. That one, I think obviously that's kind of very much rooted, unconsciously in monotheism, and that needing that outside source to save you, rather than stepping into your own power and saving yourself through the actions that you take.
Right.
But it also, can, I think we can really look at maybe how disconnected people are from their true core essence. That, they felt kind of so wounded and disempowered, that as a way of trying to boost themselves up, they're deciding that, they don't feel at home here, so that means they must be from another galaxy, and that they're so important that they came here to just save humanity and bring in this new age, rather than recognizing that being a human being is just as divine as anything else. It's a spiritual experience. And you chose to come here to have a human experience. Nobody
Right.
else is going to go save us. It's up to us to save ourselves.
Right. And, to take it back to sort of the psychological perspective, and how, most illusion perpetuating is somehow rooted in some kind of trauma or something like that.
Right.
Trauma is a violation of your boundaries, which
Mm-hmm.
was something that made you feel powerless, right? So
Mm-hmm.
these self-serving, self-important roles that people get identified with, I'm a star seed, like I'm an indigo child, I'm special. That's their own brain, their ego, their wounded ego, I should say, trying to overcompensate for their own true sense of identity being violated, to the point that they need to compensate by making themselves elevated above everyone else. They feel so disempowered that being equal isn't enough. They need to feel like they're up here, like a social hierarchy of some kind.
Right. And that's very different than what we talk about with the healthy ego, or the healthy sense of self, as I like to call it. And we can look at
Right.
this through the Isa rune. And the
Mm.
Isa rune is, represented, looks just like a nice little eye. So that's
The
interesting.
I.
Yeah, exactly.
I.
But it means ice, icicle. So when we look at an icicle, we can see that it has its own form, but it's transparent enough that it allows the light of the sun, which the sun represents the soul in the Norse tradition. It allows the light of the sun, the soul, to shine through it. So you need to have your form, your sense of being, your healthy sense of self, but that is still allowing the light of your soul to shine through. And that's a very healthy place to be. But when you come from a place of the wounded ego, that's when you start getting into needing to elevate yourself above others. And this could come in, with a lot of people maybe giving unsolicited advice, that they feel like, everybody's just dumb sheep and they don't understand it, and they're farther along in their understanding than they are. So, you need to come in and correct them. And that's also coming from a place of wounded ego, because they're trying to elevate themselves above others out of a reaction from having felt violated.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So another one we can look at is sort of like this idea that it's bad to be task oriented, or like I've heard it said, we're called human beings, not human doings, which I've said myself. And it's clever, but it's also hilarious, because it's very indicative of the imbalance. They're throwing away one polarity to adopt to take on another one. You're just swinging pendulum from one extreme to the other. Both are important. It's good to just be good being you, and sitting in the sunshine and being in nature and things like that, like being present to the moment, is absolutely important. But also, like if there was nothing to do, why would we even be born? Just to
Right.
exist and then die? Like, what's the point? How are you going to learn lessons by just sitting here, just being a plant all the time and meditating all day? Like, you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? There's nothing left to do. There's nothing left to learn. And think about it from the perspective of the everything in reality transpiring as in the mind of the all. You know, if the all, the God, is like all knowing, then there would be nothing left for it to learn. There would be nowhere else for it to grow. So it had no reason to create this place that we live for it to separate itself from itself so that it can come full circle and reunite with itself. That's this
Right.
whole journey of just like the Ouroboros, like the cycles of unity and separation, coming out and, you know, coming back into itself, like the ebb and flow of that process. So doing is just as important. You know, like another dichotomy is, and this goes right in with it, because you hear New Agers say all the time, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. It's both. If you're not going anywhere, there is no journey. Like, what are you, just wandering around mindlessly? Like, oh yeah, like what am I even doing with my life? Like, that's the masculine, is objective oriented, get, you know, linear point A to point B. That's the masculine left brain, which is awesome. But the right brain is also important, where you enjoy the journey, the experience of it. That's why the feminine is emotional. The emotions are how you experience the, you know, the situations that you cultivate through your actions there. So it is both the journey and the destination, and both give meaning to each other.
Well, and the kind of what that reminds me for is the difference between being and doing is really the play between rest and movement. Like, you know, if we look at, you know, our body needs to rest and then it also needs to move. If you just stayed around laying in bed all day, you're going to destroy your body.
Stagnation.
If you only move and you never rest, you're going to
burn yourself out.
Your body. Like, you need both of those.
That's good, dude. Mm-hmm. Love that. Very good. So let's see. So another one here is this whole sending love and light thing. And this kind of plays back also with the previous unsolicited, you know, sort of, people just take it upon themselves to send love and light, or I'll pray for you. So here's an example of how essentially in a lot of ways, not in all ways, but in a lot of ways, the New Age is just Christianity 2.0. You're just exchanging a couple of words for other words, but the beliefs are the same thing. Yeah. So, you know, like, Brian, you had a better way of explaining that, as far as like, you know, you're sending psychic energy that is
absolutely.
Not solicited.
So, especially when we start looking at things from more of the magical perspective, you can understand that when you're thinking about someone, there's psychic energy going their way. You're putting energy out into the universe. So,
right. Your ears start burning.
If you get a large group of people focusing psychic energy on a certain person, that could affect them in definitely in a way. So if that person didn't act, you know, and this is something like, I'll see it on like a lot of the kind of like neo-pagan and neo-heathen pages that people, you know, obviously they're just coming out of Christianity and haven't fully undone all that unconscious programming. They'll come on there and they'll say, oh, you know, such and such happened to this person. Can you send prayers and love and light their way? And, you know, I'd like to ask, you know, did you ask that person if that was okay? Did they solicit that? Are they wanting people for that? Or are you just having people that they don't even know at all sending psychic energy that way? You know, that's something that, you know, people may not want that. You know, some people are more sensitive things than others. So, you know, and it's not that, you know, people are saying, hey, can you send, you know, thoughts and things my way? Different and solicited. But when you're, this idea of just sending love and light is kind of a lot of, you know, like that Christian idea of, oh, you know, I'll just pray for you. And, you know, very, you know, kind of very similar tones and how those kind of come across. And, you know, it's something that, and again, even getting back to this whole sending love and light, why wouldn't you instead send someone awareness and consciousness? Like if you were, say, wanting to send something to them, why wouldn't you want to kind of send the full range of experience, the full spectrum of awareness, rather than just this one polarized version of everything's love and light?
That's good, right? Because life isn't just all love and light. So by saying love and light, you're literally having horse blinders, or the tunnel vision, where you're only just choosing to look at one thing rather than having true holistic consciousness.
Right, like, because if, you know, say someone's in a situation where they're calling for love and light, it's probably because that person may be going through a little bit of suffering or hardship. But as we've talked about before, that's just as much an important as part of the spiritual experience. So if that person is going through a challenge that they've set up for themselves, and they're kind of wanting to experience that suffering, even if it's on an unconscious level, you know, that's their
You're stealing their alchemical lead. You're stealing
right.
their fuel for that transmutation experience.
Right, exactly. So, you know, again, it really goes back, and so many fucking things we talk about in this channel, really everything will go back down to boundaries and sovereignty.
Yeah.
Like, do you understand where you begin and you end, and what rights you have and don't have? You know, do you know whether or not you're violating someone's boundaries or sovereignty? Because as we talked about before, there's obviously ways where you could violate someone's boundaries or sovereignty, but not necessarily actually be causing harm to them, you know, or you're not murdering them or stealing or, you know, whatever it may be.
Right. Like I mentioned last episode, you might come up and just try to pat somebody on the back. Now, your intentions were good. You were trying to comfort them, but guess what? They might say, I don't want to be touched right now. Well, you weren't causing harm to them, but you don't get to decide what constitutes harm. They've just told you, I don't want that. Even though I know you mean well, I appreciate the intention, but I don't want it. Thank you. You know.
Right, exactly. So, you know, again, going back to where your boundaries are and whether things are solicited or not.
Right. And as a quick side note, too, we can tie this back into the previous point about the law of attraction, where that alone isn't enough, and your thoughts and prayers and your love and light ain't enough on its own. Saying love and light isn't going to make the fucking pedophile, narcissistic, psychopath rulers of this planet just go, oh, love and light. Oh, no, he said it. Can't take anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, it's that half truth. Psychic energy is a thing. It definitely has an effect. But if you can't use that as an excuse, well, I sent love and light. What more do you want from me? No, you also have to take actions. That alone is not enough.
Right. Yeah, and the last little thing, or one of the little things here, another one we wanted to look at was with the tarot, because the tarot is an art of gnosis that we kind of see used in the New Age movement a lot, but very much from this perspective of all these cards mean something good or whatever, and there's a gentleman by the name of Thomas Sheridan, whose work I very much adore. He has a little segment, a little 10-minute video he does on this where he's talking about like the tarot is not all love and light. Like there's some cards out there that are definitely meant as warnings. They're not necessarily something you want to be drawing, or if you draw it, there's obviously an issue at hand. It doesn't, he gave quite a few little examples in there, but again, using the arts of gnosis, and we could even tie this in with like astrology, only looking at it from this kind of love and light perspective or whatever, that they're only focusing on like kind of the positive aspects of it, but kind of failing to look at maybe some of the potential challenges or something that are in the chart. So we can see how this kind of mindset can come into the arts of gnosis, but when you're putting that filter there, what you're doing is you're getting your ego in the way of that science. That's a science that you can actually look at as you're using it as a way to reflect back your subconscious and unconscious mind. But if you have an ego filter there that's so thick that you're going to be interpreting everything through that filter, and you're not actually going to be getting the message that you need to get.
Right. If it's all about taking it back to the spiritual warrior, it means you're willing to put to death those parts of yourself that you identified with that are not you. You're never going to get that if you interpret all these, the arts of gnosis is like looking in the mirror. That's why we, offer our bundle called the Reflections Package, because it's reflecting your shit back to you, the positive for confirmation, and say, yes, this is good, keep doing that, but also to bring up some of those subconscious and unconscious things that are keeping you in that feedback loop that we talk about. And the only way to get out of it is to make the unaware aware and shine light on them. So how are you going to see the dark if you're only love and light, only love and light?
Right, yeah. So, obviously I think, people can kind of see where we're coming from here. and that we're pointing at that. We're not saying to, not look at things like that, but don't stay stuck in a place of stagnation. Don't become
Right.
so polarized that you're only staying in a place of everything's all light, or what we're going to be talking about in our next episode, where everything is all doom and gloom. So we're going to be kind of looking at the flip side of it in the next episode here. Is there kind of like any last minute stuff, Logan, that you wanted to add in as far as that goes?
Not for me, man. I think that's gonna, that's a pretty good, place to wrap things up. So, of course, I want to remind everybody, if you enjoyed the video, if you appreciate our content, please help us to continue to grow the channel. Give us that thumbs up that lets YouTube know that you like what we're going out, and it's going to show it to more people. Subscribe to us, get the notifications so that you see every Friday when we post our new episodes. You get to watch that. And let's see. We obviously are always offering our Arts of Gnosis, the Reflections package that includes the astrology consultation, 9 Worlds rune reading, as well as adaptive personal coaching, whatever you're feeling called to. If you're feeling stuck, if you need just that little outside perspective, and everything that we offer is coming from that foundation of verifiable, repeatable, knowable natural law. So it's all about getting at the root cause of the causes that are creating the consequences that you want. That's how you solve problems. You get to the cause and you change that factor there.
Absolutely. And, the Arts of Gnosis obviously are your tool to start understanding how your system mechanics operate, how you not only operate with yourself, but with the world around you. So you have to start from that foundation of know thyself and then build off of that. So if anybody's, interested in any of those, just shoot us an email at contact@thewizardfactory.com. And if you have not done so yet, please make sure to sign up for our free initiation package. We'll drop a link below. And that also includes, some very helpful foundational tools and videos like casting the Circle of Magi, some breath work and meditation, as well as learning the beginnings of Rune Galder and how to use your breath work specifically in working with the runes. So make sure
all totally free
as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all you have to do is put in your email, and then you'll get a link that you can download to have as long as you want. But definitely some great foundational practices that we incorporate in our own practice every day, and a good place to start building from.
Right. And if you have already looked at the toolbox video series that comes with that initiation package, and you've implemented those things and you're ready to take things to the next level, we offer a $20 package called the Phoenix package, which really goes a lot more in depth. And the reason we're charging for this is because it's not for the faint of heart. This is for the initiate that's really serious about going deeper and really shaking things up, and it's not something to be taken lightly. This is really gonna shake loose those factors of your life that are no longer serving or are in fact holding you back in stagnation in your own life. So, if that's something that calls to you, again, message us at contact@thewizardfactory.com. The link is below, and we look forward to hearing from you. But I think that's going to wrap us up this evening. Stay tuned for next week, another episode as always. And until then, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.